All right, so we have here the beginnings of being able to add a widget, delete a widget. Let's take a look at how we could perhaps select the type of the widget so that depending on the type, it'll be rendered differently. Okay, so let's see. So right now there are no distinctions in types of widget. Right? So let's first go to our data model, and our data model that currently is being hosted here by our initial state in the reducer. Right now we have titles, we have IDs, but we don't have any types. Right? Let's add here a field that would allow us to keep track of the type of the widget, right? And presumably it'll render one way or another depending on what type of widget it is. Right? So let's see. We can have a widget type field, right? And depending on that type, I can render one way or another. So let's add here a type. Maybe it could be widget type 1. Let's use some acronym here. So just to simplify this, all right, so there might be maybe three different types of widgets. So we have widget 1, type 1, 2, 3, and then 1 again. Right? And depending on the type, I want to render one way or another. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Well, what we could do is that let's make sure that we first can render that type somewhere, right? So back in the component, not only are we rendering the title, where is it? The title and the ID, but let's also render, right, the type, like follow right here. So it'll be something like widget.widgetType. Just make sure that it's making it to the component. And indeed it is. It is. It's right there. It says widget type 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1 again. Right? So what we'd like to be able to do is render different content depending on the type. Okay? So one way to do it is to decide first where to render that. It could be right below the button. Could be that here we have where we render different things depending on the type. Say that all widgets have a title, all widgets have a name, all widgets have a widget type, yes. But depending on the type, some of them might have an input, an area, text area for typing in a list. Some of them might have different input fields and whatnot, different buttons and whatever. So let's do. So the way we could do that is that under the widgets, we could have different widget components, right, that render the different content, right, and then we want to choose which one to show depending on the widget type. Okay? So let's see how we could do that. So let's start by creating the low-level components that we might want to render. Right? Let's keep it simple. Yeah, so and we'll keep it generic at first. All right? Let's see how we could do this. So this would be widget type 1. Okay. Oops, no. Refactor, rename, so this ends with a JavaScript. And this might render maybe something simple. We'll import React from React. And then do a constant, declare the widget type, widget type 1 as a stateless component. And for now, it'll just render h3 widget type 1. That's all it'll do. All right, so something really simple. And this could be whatever you want. Right? It could be forms and buttons, and it could be as complex as you want it. Right? You can put an entire fairly complex content. So let's copy this a couple of times. 1 per type of widget. All right, 2. Let's do it again. 3. And then let's change the content. So this will be widget type 2. And I think I forgot to export. I forgot to export number 1, so let's export that too. And then finally 3. This will be 3, 3, and then export. The 2 as well. Did I change it to 2? Yes. 1 is fine, 2 is fine, and 3 is fine. Excellent. So we have 3 different content, and we want to display one or another depending on that type. Right? Okay, so the way we could do that is that in the component, perhaps we've decided that down here in this div, here's where we want to display one or another. Okay, so the way to do that is that we could create an expression. We could create a JSX expression that says, if you have the widgetType, right? Whatever the type it is, right? If it's equal to, and then here are the constants. So this is WT1. Right? So if that's true, right? And you have the, and you can AND it with the element that you want to display. Meaning that this will only render if the left-hand side is true, then the right-hand side will render. Right? We'll evaluate. So we'll evaluate 2 expressions. The left-hand side, if that's true, it will also evaluate the right-hand side. And the right-hand side can be anything. Right? It could be a Boolean expression, but it could be a function. And this function could be the widgetType 1. Right? That we can import. Here we can import all those widgets that we had before. We can import widgetType 1 from widgetType 1. There it is. And import all the other ones, 2 and 3, 2 and 3. And there it is. So we have, if it's 1, then it evaluates the left-hand side. If it's false, it won't bother, right, evaluating the right-hand side. Okay? So if this is true, then it will also evaluate the right-hand side. And since these are mutually exclusive, right, it will only render only one of these at any one time. So let's try that. Let's go back. Notice that we are indeed rendering either the widgetType 1, widgetType 2, widgetType 3, and then again widgetType 1. Again, driven by this type. Right? Depending on the type, it will render one or the other. Make sense? Right? So it's not hard to imagine, right, that you would use you could put there text areas, input fields, buttons, or whatever, and they could be encapsulated in that one particular component. Okay, make sense? All right, excellent. Let's now take a look at how is it that we would choose that, perhaps from a drop-down, right? Depending on the drop-down that you select, right, then that particular type will be created. Right? So let's take a look at that next.